fate of Europe. The Russian Navy, the Black Sea Fleet. After 3 years of defeat and defense, ships and sailors of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics prepare for the offensive. In the great ports of the Black Sea, in Odessa, in Sebastopol, invading Germans sit entrenched, holding the Crimea in talons of steel. But the year is 1944, and the high tide of Nazi conquest is ebbing. The Red Army is driving into the Crimean Peninsula from the north, as the Red Navy brings in more troops to fall on the flanks of the desperate Germans. To Soviet sailors, Sebastopol with its magnificent harbor is a prize beyond price, and they mean to get it back at any price. Red planes bomb their own city, devastate their own harbor, preparing the way for the Red Black Sea Fleet. Throws all it has available against the Russian ships. But nothing stops the relentless wave of sailors, soldiers, and Marines into Sebastopol. The Allies. Where the German soldier stands, no other shall ever put his foot. But along 2,000 miles of Russian front, from the Baltic to the Crimea, the myth of Nazi invincibility crumbles. In the 18th century, it was Charles XII of Sweden. In the 19th century, it was Napoleon. In the 20th century, it is Hitler. Each of these conquerors has tasted the bitterness of the Slavic wastes. Each has floundered on the vastness and desolation of the Russian steppes. city of sieges, city of defeats, city of victories. For the Russians, Sebastopol is a vital landmark on the march to Berlin. For the Germans, the loss of Sebastopol means retreat, disaster. Landing boats originally built for the invasion of England now serve another purpose. A German evacuation, a German Dunkirk in the Black Sea. May 9th, 1944, Sebastopol is liberated. But for the Russian people, the aftermath of triumph is heartbreak. Where the German army fights, there the SS murders and the Gestapo slaughters. The heaps of innocent executed hostages are monuments to man's inhumanity to man. The Germans came as supermen. That day is over. They leave as vanquished. That day has come. But before the German Wehrmacht is irrevocably broken, hammering in the east will find mounting echo in the west. And in the west, Germany begins to drown in the flood tide of Allied might. In the hard-won harbor of Naples, at Palermo, Corsica, Sardinia, the ships and men gather for the invasion of southern France. Operation Anvil. Ships by the hundreds, men by the thousands, will inundate the rear and flank of the Germans, who are struggling to contain the Allies on the Normandy beachhead, established 2 months earlier. And in North Africa, Oran, Algiers, Bizerta, Tunis, Alexandria, catapults for the last great seaborne invasion of the European war. 800 ships will carry the liberators to the beaches on the far Mediterranean shore. And with them go 7 French divisions carrying the Cross of Lorraine. Back to French soil under General de Gaulle. Back to their homeland with the Committee of National Liberation. Secretary of the Navy Forrestal confers with Admiral Hewitt, commander of Allied naval forces, as the Armada sails unhindered from Islam to Christendom, toward the French Riviera, the Côte d'Azur, playground in time of peace, battleground in time of war. Assault. Seize Marseille and Toulon, deep water ports which will feed the Allied armies in their sweep across France into Germany. Advance up the valley of the Rhone and join the troops from Normandy. Little opposition meets the liberators on the beaches. But inland, the Germans fight, and the Allies fight too. Inland. De la patrie. The day of glory has arrived. The French army is back again. back to fight again, back to liberate their brothers, back to free their country. Years in the shadow of the swastika. After 4 years of national eclipse, the French return to their own. Marseille is French again, and so is Toulon. The French fleet has returned. And Paris, City of Light, August 25th, 1944. No enemy could extinguish the light, nor could he comprehend it. The light that never was on sea or land. The light that is in the hearts of only those who are truly free. The liberated boulevards, the tide of Allied might flows toward tomorrow's fronts, toward Germany, and history keeps cadence with the marching columns. The Battle of France is over, but many men now marching will lie still in Europe's earth before the fate of Europe is sealed. Europe's fate, the world's tomorrow. Both are foreshadowed at a little-known resort named Yalta, in the Crimea, on the Black Sea, 40 miles from Sebastopol. Cloaked in secrecy, the leaders of the Allied coalition meet in February 1945. The United States cruiser Augusta brings President Roosevelt, and Prime Minister Churchill is there to greet him. A new name is being added to the vocabulary of history: Yalta. Statesmen, soldiers, diplomats turn an obscure Crimean town into the temporary capital of the world as the war, east and west, thunders toward its climax. Rome has long since fallen. Now the world focuses its attention on Tokyo and Berlin. On all the 6 continents and on all the 7 seas, the Allies destroy the Axis. But here at Yalta, diplomacy takes precedence over combat. Joseph Vissarionovich Djugashvili, whom the world knows as Stalin, presides over the meetings at Livadia, favorite palace of his predecessor, Tsar Nicholas II. At Yalta, the Russians agree to enter the war against Japan, and the date for the first meeting of the United Nations is set. Other agreements, open and secret, sow the seeds of future controversy and contention. But on the immediate issue, the war against Germany, the conference is clear and decisive. The communiqué says, the timing, scope, and coordination of new and even more powerful blows by our armies and air forces into the heart of Germany have been planned in detail. Nazi Germany is doomed. Since the time when Roman legions stood guard along its banks, the Rhine has been a fateful river. Not since Napoleon have invading troops crossed over it. But now, in March 1945, the barrier breaks, and the heart of Germany lies open to assault. 7 Allied armies overrun the Third Reich from Switzerland to the North Sea. The Germans set out to master mankind. They carried their fight to the four corners of the earth. Victory after victory was theirs. Every victory except final victory. The sowers of the winds of war in the east and in the west, in the north and in the south, reap the whirlwind of defeat at home. Of the National Socialist Party are consumed in their own flames and pass from the scene. It is the people who pay the price, in their persons, in their homes, in their heritage. Symbols of might and conquest, on land and sea, lie shattered and powerless, burned and sunk, rusted and corroded. Gone are the U-boats which threatened the Allies. Gone are the armies which threatened man. Gone are the planes which destroyed great cities. Gone are the means to enslave the helpless. And the men who set out to ravage and destroy, prisoners of war. Began in Warsaw, in Poland. There was Belgium, France, and the Netherlands, Yugoslavia, Albania, and Greece. Denmark, Norway, Finland, and Russia. There was Belgrade and Rotterdam, London and Coventry and Southampton and Liverpool. Scores of unremembered towns and villages. Devastation remains, but the names have changed. Cologne and Frankfurt, Dusseldorf and Mainz, Hamburg, Dresden, and Berlin. The Volkssturm, the People's Army, the last convulsive effort of a dying order to save itself. The very old, the very young, the feeble, the unfit, herded into tatterdemalion units and fed into the furnace of war. For the Volkssturm, it is one short march from enlistment to captivity. In May of 1945, the end comes. The death rattle of the National Socialist Third Reich. Hitler is dead, a suicide in his own underground bunker in Berlin. The new order he designed to last 1,000 years has died with him after only 12. The dictatorship that set a world on fire sputters out in unconditional surrender. Mighty fallen, and the weapons of war perished. Germany is beaten. The axe is broken. Statistics are meaningless. The catastrophe incalculable. But free men have given mankind the opportunity to be free. And that is the greatest of legacies. Target Suribachi. 1945. One of the great cities of the world becomes one of the great battlefields of the world. Center and soul of the Japanese war effort, Tokyo is objective number one for strategic air attack by the Allies. From the far-off Marianas, from Guam, from Saipan, from Tinian, come the B-29s, bringing war to the makers of war. Strategic attack. Shatter and destroy transport, industry, communications, resources, manpower. More critical to a country at war than her divisions in the field, her ships at sea, her planes in the air. The great fire raids consume Japan. 66 cities are swept by hurricanes of flame. Long-range fighters from Iwo Jima, rough, tough Mustangs, protect the superforts on their incessant sweeps over Japan, and scourge and scrape as they come and go. Fighters and bombers together destroy 51% of Tokyo, 44% of Yokohama, 26% of Osaka. City after city, raid after raid. Back to base. 1,400 miles from Tokyo to the Marianas. A distance that would mean death for the cripples, were it not for the emergency landing strip on Iwo Jima. Without a haven midway, without the protection of the fighters to beat off the Japanese, the raids would be impossible. Iwo Jima is the haven. B-29s wounded over Japan come limping in to safety, to refuge. Before the war is done, 25,000 American airmen will owe their lives to Iwo Jima. And in the shadow of Mount Suribachi are based the rough, tough Mustangs that guard the bombers on their way to Tokyo. Iwo Jima, the indispensable island. But before Iwo Jima, over the limitless wastes of the Pacific, on 100 islands behind Iwo, a different war had to be waged before Iwo could be reached. The campaign of staging and supply in a twilight zone which was neither combat nor peace. Only a fraction of the millions in uniform ever fired a shot in anger. For them, World War II was routine monotony from morning till night. Day in and day out, week in and week out, month in and month out, year in and year out. apathetically back and forth on routine, unspectacular missions. Cargo ships, called by their crews buckets or sieves, kept island tied to island, linking rear area bases to war ahead, to peace at home. If the dreary role of these ships and sailors demanded that they do that and this and that, they nevertheless executed their dull jobs. Sea Islands. Exotic, magic, fragrant. Land of mystery and romance. Ulithi and Majuro. Los Negros and Marpak. Funafuti and Numi. Tonga Tabu and Ifati. But when the GIs arrived, the islands became something else again. A land of horseshoes and horseplay. Beer and baseball. Jive and jazz. As the waning days of the war called for yet more fire, yet more blood, on a yet more distant island. From rear bases long since forgotten by all except those who were stationed there, the convoys continually moved off toward the destiny of history. Not all the battles in the Pacific were fought against the Japanese. There were other terrors to face, and none was worse than an angry sea, lashed by typhoons. Eternal Father, strong to save, whose arm hath bound the restless wave, who bids the mighty ocean deep its own appointed limits keep. Oh, hear us when we cry to thee, for those in peril on the sea. According to the Marines, the South Pacific is the only place in the world where you can stand up to your waist in mud and have dust blow in your eyes. Always certain. However bad any given island may have been, the next was sure to be worse. But the men who were ordered to take Iwo Jima in February 1945 did not know that the worst of all lay ahead. The ships converged on Iwo Jima. The voyage was long, tedious, interminable. The men relaxed and waited, as best they knew how. Iwo Jima, 8 square miles of reeking volcanic ash on the doorstep to Tokyo. 7 battleships, 4 heavy cruisers, 15 destroyers take up position, clamping a ring of floating artillery around the tiny island, picking their targets, finding the range. February 1945. All the guns and all the ships prepare for 72 hours of furious, continuous, unbroken barrage. The most concentrated naval bombardment of World War II. Marines, we have little choice except to take Iwo Jima by force of arms, by character and courage. There is no room for surprise and maneuver, only headlong assault. Ashore, 23,000 Japanese soldiers are dug deep in the most formidable defenses the Marines have ever encountered. The island is a solid mass of underground fortifications, impregnable against bombardment. They can be destroyed only by force of arms, by character and courage. Caves of Mount Suribachi, which dominate the entire island, the Japanese zero in their artillery on the landing beaches, pinning the Marines to the shore in an avalanche of fire and steam, paralyzing any advance, threatening obliteration. Support go out to the carriers offshore. In combat information centers, all available planes and pilots are prepared to answer the pleas from the beachhead in hell. Winged sailors fly to the aid of earthbound Marines. More reserves, more supplies, more Americans spill into the slaughterhouse that is Iwo Jima and claw their way toward their target, Suribachi. While the mountain remains Japanese, the island remains invincible. 5,000 American Marines will die before Iwo Jima falls. But in the bloody bookkeeping of war, the price will be balanced by the 25,000 American airmen whose lives the island will save. One man will die today. To save 5 will live tomorrow. 556 feet, Suribachi towers above the island of Iwo Jima. 556 feet, the Marines fight their way upward. 556 feet from disaster to victory. When freedom from her mountain height unfurled her standard to the air, she tore the azure robe of night and set the stars of glory there. And now, the road to Mandalay. The blueprint for war in the Far East, called by history the Tanaka Memorial, was drawn in 1927. It proclaimed that Japan must adopt a policy of blood and iron. In order to conquer the world, Japan must conquer Europe and Asia. In order to conquer Europe and Asia, Japan must first conquer China. 10 years later, in 1937, Japan begins to execute the plan. Shanghai, Nanking, Pankau. City by city, province by province, the Japanese slash at the vast, unyielding body of China. China bleeds from 1,000 wounds, but her 500 million people will not be subdued. China's leaders have neither planes, nor tanks, nor artillery, nor organized armies with which to stem the flood of 1 million Japanese soldiers. But with what little she has, China fights on under her leader, Chiang Kai-shek. Land is the one forbidding weapon China does have. Blast, burn, destroy everything on land, everything in the invader's path. Surrender only the scorched earth. Imperial Japan cuts 300,000 square miles out of the heart of Republican China. And China's coast is shackled to Japan's navy. 1 million refugees flee inland. The incident in China today will be war in the world tomorrow. Deeper and deeper into the interior, beyond the reach of the invaders. A mass migration toward the new capital of free China, toward Chongqing, landlocked oasis in the midst of Asia. 'Free China's sole access to survival now lies southward across the Himalayas, southward to Burma. Rangoon, Mandalay, Lashio are joined together by rail and road. From the port of Rangoon, supplies are carried north. To link China with Burma, a road is built from Chongqing to Lashio, the Burma Road. On this road hangs China's only hope of health, of life. The independent kingdom of Siam is Burma's eastern roommate. Siam, land of teak and mangrove, land of 16,000 temples. To reach Burma, to cut the Burma Road, to isolate China completely, the Japanese must first absorb Siam. Absorb it they do, without violence or resistance. Siam, already betrothed to Japan, succumbs gracefully the day after the attack on Pearl Harbor. The Japanese get their base for the invasion of Burma. Semi-Oriental ceremonies legalize the union. One week after Pearl Harbor, the Imperial Japanese Army bursts across the border of Siam into Burma. 5 months of ravaging and slaughter lie ahead before the Allied defenders are split and shattered. Into central Burma go the invaders on the road to Mandalay. Mandalay, whose conquest will cut the Burma Road. In May of 1942, the city falls. China is isolated. China is cut off from her allies. Now it is the British and Burmese who put their wealth and resources to the torch. These the enemy shall not have. The flames that were lit in China now scorch the earth that is Burma. The Allies are driven out of Burma. But the Japanese have been deafened by the sound of their own guns. For the wind is in the palm trees, and the temple bells they say, "Come you back, you British soldier. Come you back to Mandalay." In Canada, in Quebec, Allied statesmen and the combined chiefs of staff plan their return to Mandalay, to Chongqing. China, Burma, India have moved to the forefront of global planning. China must be kept in the war. Land communications must be reopened. A supreme commander is chosen to direct the campaign in Southeast Asia. Admiral Lord Louis Mountbatten. From the island of Ceylon, from bases in India, Lord Mountbatten marshals his sea power, without which no land campaign will be possible. The United States carrier Saratoga is welcomed to the Allied East Indies fleet by the crew of the British battleship Queen Elizabeth. The Royal Navy, the United States Navy, and the navies of France, the Netherlands, Australia, South Africa pool their warships to guard 7 million square miles of ocean. The mission of the fleet in these waters is threefold. Deny the Indian Ocean and adjacent waters to the enemy. Cut his communications with Burma. Protect the Allied convoys, on whose safe arrival the destiny of Southeast Asia now depends. His Majesty's Indian ship. India is a focal point in the world's communication system, and Indians have been seafarers since prehistoric times. In World War II, Indian ships and sailors fight in the Battle of the Atlantic, in North Africa, at Sicily. And as the Royal Indian Navy, they help defend their homeland against Japanese invasion, keep the sea lanes open to liberate Burma, to save China. Cruisers like His Majesty's ship Delhi, destroyers like the Rajput, patrol the Bay of Bengal, the Arabian Sea, the Gulf of Mannar. Alert, efficient, ready to fight for the cause of freedom. Axis submarines, German, Italian, Japanese, prowl the Indian Ocean. An ever-constant threat to Allied convoys carrying men and supplies to China, Burma, India. The main body of the Japanese surface fleet has more than it can do to cope with the United States Navy in the Pacific. But there are Imperial submarines to spare. 3 vast oceans, past 3 great continents, the supplies for victory reach the docks of Calcutta. From the United States, from Great Britain, from the factories of India herself. Half a world away, the war in Europe demands and consumes millions of men, billions of supplies. Half a world away, the war in the Pacific demands and consumes more millions of men, more billions of supplies. Calcutta gets only what can be spared from democracy's ever-emptying arsenals. Cargo planes will fly a portion of the supplies into China over the Himalayan hump at the rate of 47,000 tons a month. Even so, the overwhelming mass of materiel must reach China overland, or China will perish. The problem of getting the supplies through becomes the toughest of the war, of any war in history. The first link is a ramshackle railroad that hauls the supplies north from Calcutta. The first link is the easy link. Southeast Asia overrun by the Japanese, with the Burma Road cut, Allied supplies pour from Calcutta to Lido, on the border of India. From Lido, the Allies must now hack a road out of the central Burmese jungle, fighting the enemy and nature all the way, to join up with the old Burma Road. Troops, supplies, equipment assembled to drive the Japanese from Burma, to build the road, and to lay a pipeline along the route to carry desperately needed oil and gasoline to China. But before engineers can build, armies must fight. And before armies can fight, man must wait on weather. The monsoon that storms in from the Indian Ocean at every change of season, lashing jungle and mountain with warm, paralyzing torrents of rain. Has come. A truly cosmopolitan army stands ready for the bitter ordeal ahead in Burma. Scotsmen, Irishmen, Welshmen, Americans, Australians, New Zealanders, Indians, Gurkhas, Burmese, Africans, Chinese, British. The campaign begins late in 1943. Into the jungle file the Allied troops. Into the jungle that reeks and steams with 1,000 fetid evils spread by germ and insect. Malaria, cholera, typhus, dysentery, beriberi, tropical fever. It will be a war of hunting and stalking, of ambush and infiltration, of sudden alarm by day, of strange terrors by night. Behind the combat troops come the engineers to lay their pipeline foot by foot, yard by yard, across the conquered jungle. And foot by foot, yard by yard, the road begins to creep across the conquered jungle. Deep in the tangled jungle of Burma, on the banks of the Irrawaddy, boat yards, and then boats are hewn out of the forest. Amphibious craft for the next assault, the next landing. The interior of Burma is slashed and crisscrossed by wide, tumultuous rivers almost impassable to man, but not to the men who have determined to conquer nature while conquering the Japanese. Foot, yard by yard, and then mile by mile. The men, the pipe, the road move forward toward China. Crack Japanese units, conquerors of Singapore and Malaya, are decimated in the jungles of Burma. And the vultures, they never had it so good. The enemy has been challenged and beaten in jungle warfare. Churchill never made a truer statement. In spite of untold hardships and frustration, in spite of the hazards of nature and the enemy, the men who made up the Allied forces in Southeast Asia meet the challenge and overcome the obstacles. Come you back, you British soldier. Come you back to Mandalay. And back they come, the British 14th Army. Meanwhile, through jungle, swamp, and forest, over ridge, hill, and mountain, across river and ravine, 2,000 miles of pipeline, an enormous artery pumping a life-giving transfusion of gasoline and oil into China. Many called it impossible. But the Lido Road becomes one of the greatest feats of construction in man's ancient endeavor to move from one place to another. The Japanese are cleared from central Burma. Now from Lido stretch highway and pipeline south and east across Burma, to Lashio, into China. The Lido Road, joined at last with the Burma Road, is open. In January 1945, the first convoys head for China, bearing relief for a free country from the free world. The supplies the ships brought in from assembly lines thousands of miles away roll in endless procession toward China. A journey of more than 3 weeks from Lido. At long last, China is one with her allies. At long last, the East joins hands with the West. And now, suicide for glory. In the year of 1938, Emperor Hirohito of Japan writes a poem. Peaceful is morning in the shrine garden. World conditions, it is hoped, will also be peaceful. The imperial poetry mirrors the Japan that most of the world wants to know. A picturesque land where nature is arranged in graceful patterns, and where people are arranged around the patterns. The Japanese live in a remote, feudal age whose philosophy is warlike, built on a worship of the nation, of Japan itself. Materially, the Japanese emulate the West, but spiritually they belong to the East. Hirohito receives the homage of his 73 million subjects, not as poet of peace, but as warrior god, as both priest and emperor. He is Heika Denka, sublime majesty. He is Tenshi-sama, son of heaven. He is destined by divine right to seek domination of all the world. And so it comes about that in 1945, the American Fifth Fleet steams in battle formation toward Japan to smother the domination which set afire the Far East. After 3.5 years of war, the long arm of Allied sea power reaches out to throttle aggression at its source. Huge task groups, 1,500 ships, 550,000 sailors, coast guardsmen, soldiers, marines, all under the command of Admiral Spruance. An assault as large as the Normandy invasion is bearing down on the island of Okinawa, 300 miles south of the Japanese home islands, 6,000 miles from continental United States. What the Japanese once thought to be impossible, what the Allies hardly dared hope, is about to become reality. Easter morning, April 1st, 1945, when the troops go ashore at Okinawa. It is also April Fool's Day. Strangely, ominously, there is no resistance. But no one is fooled. Within hours, Okinawa becomes the same old story. Resistance stiffening is the word from advance units. And then, greatly increased resistance. And then, 83 days of slow, deadly, savage struggle. Okinawa knocks open the door to Japan itself. Not a sailor, not a soldier, not a marine, not a man in the world knows this is to be the last great battle of the war. A war branded by great battles. Tokyo. The Japanese government meets an emergency session. The government knows Okinawa is a smoldering beacon of coming defeat. The government knows it must rally the people in a last desperate effort to stave off collapse. Propaganda gives way to harsh, intolerable truth. The Japanese sun is setting. Schools and hospitals, children and nurses, young and old, crippled and infirm, are harnessed to the war machine. With factories smashed by air raids, with manpower consumed at the fronts, with production falling, with the enemy approaching, every citizen of Japan is ordered to increase production, stand firm, drive on. At the fronts, fanaticism. The army is isolated, the air force broken, the navy sunk. But one group is left to save Japan, the kamikaze. Pilots pledge to crash themselves and their planes into enemy warships. The Japanese raise suicide to the status of a military tactic. Kamikaze pilots believe that by dying for the emperor, they live forever. And some even attend their own funerals before the final takeoff. Some fly in their burial robes. All wear a sacred scarf, symbolizing their sacred mission. pilots take their final vow. I am determined to destroy with my own body the enemy craft that menace our holy soil. I shall strike without returning. Farewell. We shall meet at the Yasukuni Shrine. At the Yasukuni Shrine, where the hero dead of Japan achieved godhood. It is April the 6th. From the island of Kyushu, 350 suicide planes take off for Okinawa. To those they leave behind, to the life they leave behind, one final government announcement. Valiantly, the young eagles dash forth to attack along a path from which there is no homecoming. The fleet spread far and wide around and around Okinawa. Scores of ships are destined to fall victim of suicide attack before the kamikazes have done their worst. Around the fleet, around the island, radar pickets are ringed. Watchdog destroyers, whose mission it is to detect oncoming Japanese planes, plot their course, speed, and range, and alert the bigger boys. From the destroyer picket line go out the first warnings of the long, racking, nerve-shattering ordeal of the fleet at Okinawa. If it be now, 'tis not to come. If it be not to come, it will be now. If it be not now, yet it will come. The readiness is on. The fleet is ready. But one method, and only one, can stop the kamikaze. Shoot him down before he has a chance to crash himself against a ship. American pilots pit courage and skill against the self-destroying frenzy of the Japanese. One last weapon remains against the kamikazes that break through the combat air patrols. Anti-aircraft fire, as intense, murderous, and impenetrable as the ships can possibly make it. The battle becomes a duel between gunners who want to live and pilots who want to die. attacks are incessant, the damage staggering. To die is to die, but to live is to fight. And the fleet that came to stay fights and lives and stays. With famous names like Bunker Hill and Enterprise, Idaho and New Mexico, Tennessee and Nevada are damaged. The kamikaze becomes the greatest threat encountered by the United States fleet in World War II. The suffering is terrible, the casualties worse. Night brings no respite, darkness no relief. The fantastic contest between those who fight to live and those who fight to die goes on around the clock. This was the opportunity the Japanese had been waiting for. The kamikaze pilots would trade a plane for a ship, trade suicide for glory. But the ships carry on. others come to the rescue. The risks of death are great, but the determination to save a shipmate is greater. Hundreds of sailors are trapped below. Others, hemmed in by flames, escape over the side. While the harsh struggle for Okinawa, on land, at sea, in the air, grinds on toward victory, free men everywhere suffer defeat. 9,000 miles away, in the United States, the commander-in-chief has fallen. A casualty of war as surely as if a kamikaze had felled him at the helm. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, defender of democracy, foe of tyranny, architect of victory, is dead. He loved the fleet, its men, its ships, the sea. But as President of the United States, the Navy could but share his allegiance. His life was full, and the elements so mixed in him that nature might stand up and say to all the world, this was a man. And at Okinawa, 1 out of every 7 naval casualties in World War II result from the fight for Okinawa. Of the 1,500 ships engaged in the campaign, 30 were sunk, 223 damaged. 8 carriers were hit, but all survived. More than 3,500 kamikaze planes were destroyed. The greatest suicide offensive in history, waxed and waned and collapsed. sailors at Okinawa bled. So did the soldiers and Marines ashore. If the Japanese were determined to commit suicide, the Americans were determined to live. If this last battle of World War II was one of the greatest, so was the victory. And now, Design for Peace. "5:30 a.m., July 16, 1945, the desert of New Mexico. From a single gram of matter, man releases the explosive energy of 20,000 tons of TNT. Dawn of the atomic age. "8:16 a.m., August 6, 1945, Hiroshima, Japan. A city dies as an age is born. One bomb from one plane, and life becomes death. One bomb from one plane, and Hiroshima is wasteland. One bomb from one plane, and 78,000 human beings perish. Three days later, one more bomb on Nagasaki, and 24,000 more die. Two bombs, and World War II is over. Allied ships sail into Tokyo Bay, the goal toward which they set their course 44 months earlier, after the attack on Pearl Harbor. To the 163 amphibious landings that were made in the Pacific, a final token one is added. The 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, originally wiped out at Bataan and Corregidor, reconstituted, goes ashore to test whether the Japanese will resist on their own soil, whether peace has really come. There is no resistance. The Empire of Japan surrenders fully, completely. The Allies are spared 1 million casualties. Liberated prisoners of war, the first fruits of victory, the immediate prize of peace. 23,000 Allied soldiers, sailors, Marines are freed from camps throughout Japan. Some have been captive since the fall of Manila and Singapore in 1942. Many who survive are near the limits of mental and physical endurance. For the living, liberation and relief, and return to home, return to life. For the dead, to all who died in strange lands, under foreign skies, warrior rest, thy task is done. The Navy's hospital ships receive the sick, the worn, the weary. Benevolence for those who have waited, those who have suffered. Ships of the United States Navy converge. The Allied Armada gathers. Britain's Royal Navy ends the long, long odyssey from Dunkirk on the English Channel to victory in the Bay of Tokyo. pilots guide the Allied ships into harbor, past the shattered symbols of aggression, past the junk and debris that was once the magnificent Imperial Japanese Navy. For the island empire, the dream of conquest died with the death of the Imperial fleet. From the battleship Missouri, the word was flashed. Cease fire, cease fire. The war is over. From the Missouri went Admiral Halsey's message to the fleet. Well done. Now, on September 2nd, 1945, the final act of World War II is staged on her decks. The formal surrender of the Japanese Empire to the Allied powers. On behalf of 9 Allied nations, China, the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, France, the Netherlands, New Zealand, the Soviet Union, and the United States, General of the Army MacArthur directs the Japanese to sign the instrument of surrender. Foreign Minister Shigemitsu signs for Emperor Hirohito and the government of Japan. General Umezu for the Imperial General Staff. From a Manchurian prison camp, General Wainwright, captured on Corregidor, and General Percival, captured at Singapore, have come to take a place of honor with General MacArthur, who signs for the Allied powers. Admiral Nimitz for the Armed Forces of the United States. One condition, and only one, is allowed by the Allies in Japan's unconditional surrender. Emperor Hirohito remains, and to his subjects he proclaims a new day, a future day wherein men, not armies, men, not navies, men, not air forces, men, not despots, will determine their own destiny, set their own course. And so comes the occupation. But the occupation will go. In Europe, throughout the world, the sound of guns has ceased. But the sound of mourning continues and will continue. Innocent victims of war do not forget. And let none forget. The brand of tyranny and oppression will forever scar the conscience of mankind. They fight to liberate, President Roosevelt said of the Allied armies. At Buchenwald and Dachau, at Belsen and Auschwitz, the locks were broken, the barriers fell. In the concentration camps, in the slave labor depots, men inflicted their greatest indignity on man. But now he is free. Man vilified, man broken. This is society at its blackest depth. The human cost that no statistics can even suggest. No words describe. Maimed in body, to the broken in spirit, the words victory and peace have lost their meaning. But for all the rest, the words mean life and liberty and home. For the troops in Europe, earmarked for further combat in the Pacific, the bomb that burst over Hiroshima has one single surpassing meaning. Home. Home again. In the Pacific, where war began for the United States and ceased for the world, the voyage home is called the Magic Carpet Run. And nothing out of the Arabian Nights is more magical for these battle-weary sailors than the prospect ahead. They're going home. Of the convoy, of any convoy, the hours that drag, the interminable days. But now the undercurrent of chill and foreboding, of hostile shores and coming combat is gone. Now the ships that were built to kill and destroy become floating playgrounds, where the dirty job of war is over, and cares are cast aside. was sung long ago by Walt Whitman. Flaunt out, O sea, your separate flag of nations. Flaunt out visible as ever the various ship signals. But reserve especially for yourself and for the soul of man one flag above all the rest. A spiritual woven signal for all nations. Emblem of man elate above death. Token of all brave captains and all intrepid sailors and mates, and all that went down doing their duty. Reminiscent of them, twined from all intrepid captains, young or old, a pennant universal, subtly waving all time, for all brave sailors, all seas, all ships. Of both coasts, along the west coast, along the east coast, the ships that sailed away to war and death bring back their millions to peace and life. To these men, free men owe their victory on land, their victory in the air, their victory at sea. whom they come, each in search of his own design for peace, his own pattern for the future. But first, in all the Allied lands, in all the Allied world, one last parade. The parade of all who marched out together to meet the challenge of tyranny, and who, together, conquered it. Free world, on its march toward tomorrow, takes with it the moral that Winston Churchill derived from the struggle that is past. In war, resolution. In defeat, defiance. In victory, magnanimity. In peace, goodwill.